Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, welcome back. Let's go around and say our names. I'm Jim.
Christian.
Raymond.
Joe.
My name's Gary.
I'm Kay.
My name is Michael.
I'm Pat.
I'm John.
My name is Mark.
Silas.
I'm David.
Jim.
My name is Jerry.
I'm Hal.
Jeff.
My name's David.
Larry.
Michael.
Tom.
Rob.
Jan.
Jack.
My name is Pat.
Dennis.
Seamus.
My name is David.
Peter.
Bob.
Richard.
Risha.
Joe.
I'm Nancy.
Jay.
Rick. How's that?
Gary. And Nancy and Christian, first timers, welcome. We're privileged to have our speaker today, John Martin, who is long exemplified an integration of the spiritual and the work world. And he's just returned from a 3-month silent meditation retreat. He leads a LGBTQ center in San Mateo in the Peninsula, is that correct?
Redwood City. Mm-hmm.
Redwood City. He's leads workshops and retreats on Metta, and is a meditation teacher and is all around worthwhile citizen of the world.
So I am just getting used to speaking again, so need to watch the volume on my voice. So Jay, could you raise your hand and flag me if I'm speaking too softly? So far so good?
So far so good.
Okay. So it's really great to be with this group. I feel immediately right at home in this Sangha, and it feels especially important in this time to be together in community and feel the refuge, safety in community with the threats and challenges we're seeing in our society today. It feels like nothing I've seen before in my life. And it's sad because I look at the history of the U.S. and it's been pretty steady but uneven progression of human rights. But it has been steady, so this feels like one of the biggest bumps in the road. So I'm very grateful to have this spiritual practice at this time, to be able to take refuge in Sangha, take refuge in silence, take refuge in awareness, to bring the practice of moment-to-moment awareness to life, and to stay connected to the heart. That's what I feel is so important right now as practitioners, to stay connected to the heart, to stay connected to our deepest values, to speak and act from a place of truth. And I think I've just been recalling almost every day since I've been back from retreat the words of the Buddha, that hatred never ceases by hatred. Hatred is healed by love alone. Hatred never ceases by hatred. Hatred is healed by love alone. And I love that the Buddha used the word healed, because it makes clear that hatred is a sickness. It's rooted in greed, aversion, delusion, the defilements that cloud the mind. There's so much hatred. There's so much hatred in our society right now, and those who have the most hatred seem to feel licensed to speak and act on that hatred. I've been hearing stories from some Sangha members, even right here in the Bay Area, who have been experiencing that hatred. A person in one of my Sanghas who's transgender, right on a college campus, someone just lashed out. And think of people in our community around the U.S. who live in more Republican states who are probably experiencing more of that direct hatred. I think of my partner who's an immigrant and his parents and family members and the hatred toward immigrants. Those who are most oppressed are really being targets, unfortunately. And I think of the Martin Luther King quote, the power of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, who stayed connected with the heart, had such power in their society, such power to make change because they were speaking and acting from love. And from Martin Luther King, by its very nature, love creates and builds up. Love transforms with redemptive power. By its very nature, love creates and builds up. Love transforms with redemptive power. So that's what I'm feeling in my own practice. I feel fear at times. I feel some anger. I can actually, nothing wrong with feeling that. I can feel some power when I feel the anger. And when I stand right in the middle of it, I can be aware of it all. I have the intention of not shutting down and closing off, but being open to experience everything that's going on, all the emotions being felt. And by staying with the practice, connecting with the earth, staying true to the heart, I feel the power that I feel is going to support me in being able to speak and act from a place of truth. So that's kind of a long intro to what my talk is really about today, which is generosity. I wanted to speak about generosity, which very much is a heart quality. Having an open heart supports the practice of generosity, and the practice of generosity as well supports the purification of the heart. So I remember, as I was preparing this talk, I was really connecting with one of the things that brought me to practice. I started when I was maybe in my late 30s, opening to feel gratitude. Gratitude really supports the arising of generosity. And the story, my life was when I was 19 years old, I was homeless for a while, and I think my father kicked me out of the house very suddenly because I was gay. But I'll never know, he died shortly after that. And I suddenly found myself without a place to live. There wasn't actually a word homeless that existed at the time. I don't remember anybody saying the word homeless in 1975. But a church gave me a place to stay, and I had no connection to this church. It was such a pure act of generosity. They had no expectation of my giving anything back, simply reaching out to help someone in need. So I hadn't opened in 20 years to feel that gratitude. And in starting to open to feel that gratitude, it started to allow the opening to all the pains I had felt, allowed the heart to start to purify. And a sense of wanting to give back, wanting to perform generous acts as a way of giving back. I remember at that time, around that time, I ran across a young man, right about 19 years old, standing outside of Pete's Coffee on Market Street, who was asking for money, and he didn't look like he belonged on the street. And I talked to him, and he was newly homeless, and really just connected with him because I could connect with what that experience was like. And I suggested that he go to Larkin Street Youth Services, and he said he was too old. At that time, the cutoff age was 18. And as things happened, shortly after that, I was asked to help raise money for a new homeless shelter for 19 to 23-year-olds at Larkin Street. So such a great opportunity to give back. But it was really sad to see that young man. I saw him now and then, periodically in the Castro over about a 4-year period, and could see his life, his mental health just greatly deteriorate. And finally he disappeared. I didn't see him anymore. But that opening the heart to gratitude, then opening the heart to generosity, allowing the purification process to begin, and then the healing, and that actually is one of the things that brought me into practice, and finding the precious Dharma that I fell in love with. I think I also recognized at the time there was a not enoughness. I hear this from new practitioners sometimes, that despite having all the material comforts, I recognized there had to be something more. That's one of the things that really drew me to this practice. So a few more words about the context of generosity. In the Buddha's teachings, he started with generosity. He told practitioners who were new to practice generosity or sila. And then, after developing this practice, the Buddha provided instructions on sila, morality. I like to define morality in the Buddha's teachings as living in harmony with the world, living in harmony with the heart, living in harmony with the way things are. So he taught generosity, sila, and then he would teach meditation and insight practice. So not the way we may usually practice in the West, but it shows the importance that the Buddha placed on generosity to be right at the foundation of practice. So I want to say words today about the importance of this practice. I want to particularly emphasize the importance of appreciating your own generosity. Too often I think we just don't pause to appreciate the joy that can come in the giving and the reflecting afterwards on the giving. And when we reflect on it, we really make more space for generosity to arise in the future for the further purification of the heart. So generosity, I also wanted to speak about the importance of acting on the impulse to give, paying particular attention to the impulse, and then acting on that impulse. It's really been an important part of my practice in the last 4 years, and I'll say more about that. And then I want to say a few words about honoring those who are generous toward us, how we can really honor the merit of others who are practicing generosity and are generous for us. But generosity is simply the practice of giving without expecting anything in return. Giving without expecting anything in return. It's a rich practice in itself to watch for that little bit of expecting something in return. And it arises as a response to suffering. When we see suffering, often a wish for the suffering to end, especially if we're fully present. And then the action will follow, the act of generosity. Sometimes it's appropriate. Sometimes we see a homeless person on the street and feel compassion, but it may not be appropriate to take an action. Other times a generous act may be appropriate. I want to emphasize the importance of listening to the heart, trusting the impulse on the action to take. And generosity is really supported by contentment and not needing. If we feel content, peaceful with things as they are, we open to feel we have the things we need in life, then our hearts are going to be more open to the needs of others. A sense of contentment and peace, just a sense of equanimity, kind of the calm, peaceful acceptance of things as they are, can really provide a ground for generosity to arise spontaneously. So I want to say too, sometimes there's multiple layers going on with generosity. When I started volunteering, became a board member for Larkin Street, serves homeless and runaway youth, the first board meeting I showed up at, I thought it was really going to be generous. This was what it was about. And then I immediately saw 90% of the reason I was there was for healing. And it's important. Nothing wrong with that. It really supported the healing process. And then the process was still being generous, supporting those in need. So sometimes there's multiple layers going on when we're acting generously. So there's beautiful feelings that come with generosity. And I experienced this on my 3-month retreat. And knowing the importance of generosity, even on a 3-month retreat, I was looking for opportunities. You may think there's not many opportunities on a retreat, entirely in silence, but simply holding the door open for someone, volunteering to fill someone's shift, yogi shift when they're sick. There's all kinds of opportunities. Requires some real close paying attention. That's what the practice is, though. So I started picking up trash occasionally. I walk along the road in front of Insight Meditation Society, and it took me about 10 days before I said, well, I see this trash along the road every day. I really should pick up the trash. This is a simple, generous act to perform. And one of the more beautiful meditations I had on that 3-month retreat was a reflection on generosity. And it didn't arise to a thinking process. It just is what came up in a particular sitting, was a review of the acts in my life that were generous and connecting with the joy of others who perform generous acts. Really beautiful feelings of the heart that arise. The Buddha said, generosity brings happiness at every stage of its expression. We experience joy in forming the intention to be generous. We experience joy in the actual act of giving something. And we experience joy in remembering the fact that we have given. All those steps along the way. So maybe ask you to pause just a minute and close your eyes and reflect on some acts you've performed recently that's generous. It could be very, very simple. Might have been holding the door open coming in for someone behind you. Might have been listening to a loved one or friend just experiencing difficulty in their life. Might have been writing a check. So feeling that in the heart center. Feeling it in the body. Reflecting on that generous act. Seeing if there's any emotion or feeling that arises with the reflection. I'll ring the bell, ding. So maybe some of you connected with some sense of that joy that the Buddha referred to, the joy in the intention, the joy in the action, the joy in the remembering. Anything come up for anybody they want to mention? Any particular emotions or things you might have been surprised by? Yes?
Well, for me it was a desire, not a desire, but the release. The release of, because I was giving money to someone on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what happens to that money, I had to release that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it is theirs. And just wish them well, not knowing that I'll ever see them again.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes?
Well, last night there was this fellow singing Frank Sinatra songs on Market and Castro. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like just filled up the whole intersection there. And I just had to give him some money. I mean, you know, this guy is contributing to my community, I mean, honestly. And I just felt like it was, this kind of thing needs to be supported.
Right? You really were watchful, you caught the impulse and acted on that impulse. It's beautiful. Anybody else? Yes?
Thank you for this. I was thinking about also how sometimes it's hard to be generous. Like there's those feelings of, so I think I heard it at this Sangha or maybe against the stream, where give to the point where it starts to feel stingy. And I always try to remember that because there are periods where I really want to be generous with time, or energy, or effort, or money, and I get that feeling of stinginess. And but it the thinking about the positive, how it's going to feel so good in so many ways to so many people, sort of overcomes that stingy feeling. And just on Friday, one of my coworkers, a fellow teacher, her mom died last week. Suddenly, she had abandoned her classroom and fly to Nevada and leave her kids with a sub. And so I was in her classroom at 6 a.m. making gift bags for her kids because I needed to get in my classroom. And I was thinking, oh God, I was literally out loud saying to myself, oh God. But I knew that it meant a lot to her in her grief and her anxiety far away, and for all those kids.
Doing exactly what you're doing to pause and appreciate the generosity of your action. It just helps kind of reprogram our neurology to support the heart continuing to be more open. Okay?
You bring up a dilemma for me, John, because when you're giving examples of generosity and you said that you wrote a check and all that, and I do have certain groups to which I automatically give money on a monthly basis. What happens though is that I'll be walking down the street and I'll see someone who's homeless or asking for money and all that, and the fact that I was generous within the confines of my home, that was really comfortable, it just all melts away and I feel helpless because I just can't, I feel like, well, I can't help everybody. This one's right in front of me, the money that goes to the other groups, never meet those people.
Yeah.
But so what happens is I feel like I downplay my own generosity because in the moment I feel stingy and not generous.
Yeah.
And that's what I have a hard time.
And because it's right there in front of us in the city all the time. But there's limits to what we can do, and we have to have the wisdom to trust what's appropriate and give maybe to that edge of where it hurts, but recognize there's only so much we can do, and know when the contribution maybe the giving may be useful, and sometimes it isn't. And sometimes once in a while I give to the homeless in the street, but usually I don't. Usually I write checks. I do make it a practice. I really watch to make eye contact with the homeless, particularly if they're engaging with me or say anything, is not to see them as human beings. And to made a practice in the last year of watching to see whether there's any sense of compassion for the person on the street. Because I would find sometimes there'd be a shutting down around too much. If I'm present, there's a strength in the presence to feel compassion for the suffering, even if there's nothing that I can do in that moment. Not shutting down around it. It may be different, but continuing to bring the practice, what I encourage is the present awareness, just to be aware of what's present in your own heart and mind. And trust the heart more than the thinking process. I was really doing that on this 3-month retreat. It was so clear the wisdom was arising not from any thinking process, but entirely from the Dharma itself, from awareness itself. So, I want to say that the practice really, I was hearing this in the folks speaking, that it really supports the purification and opening of the heart. I think so much of our practice is to allow the veil of confusion to lift and to see the beautiful qualities of the heart that are already here, that loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy are natural qualities of the heart, are really innate qualities. And if we keep bringing attention to the moment-to-moment experience, having the intention to be present with our deepest values, we're just allowing that veil of confusion to lift and can see that nothing is missing. It's a great benefit of my own practice to see nothing is missing in the present moment, nothing is missing in the heart, and ultimately open to the potential of a peace that's possible in any moment. a happiness that's not dependent on any conditions. This is another promise of the Buddha's teachings, is an unconditional happiness. Regardless of health, regardless of financial circumstance, a happiness that's unshakable. And this practice of generosity really supports that opening, that direction of practice. I'm feeling my voice fading. Can you still hear me? I'll speak up a little bit. So generosity too really supports these beautiful qualities naturally opening of metta, loving kindness, compassion, supports qualities like faith and patience, courage, the courage to speak and act from the truth. So I draw particular inspiration on generosity from the way these teachings have been carried forward for 2,500, almost 2,600 years. Well, the fact that we're here practicing with the Buddha's teachings can directly be linked to the moment of the Buddha's awakening and the teachings being carried forward by generosity over that 2,600 years. So when I give to support the Dharma, I feel like I'm in this stream of giving that's keeping the Dharma alive. It's kept the Dharma alive for 2,600 years, and we'll continue, hopefully, to keep the Dharma alive for much longer. And think of all of the renunciants who gave up all money and depending entirely on generosity, all of the centers that exist, that have existed, that depended on generosity. Especially, it always inspires me that for the first 200 years or so, the hundreds of talks by the Buddha were memorized, had been memorized by monks, and they would repeat those talks every day of their entire lives, pass them on to the next generation until there was a written language. Talk about generosity. And these words I'll read now from the Buddha, we know today because those monks repeated those words for maybe 6 or 8 generations of monks repeating those words for 200 years. The Buddha said the greatest gain is to give to others, and the greatest loss is to receive without gratitude. I can let those words in, but also appreciate how those words have been carried forward miraculously. And it's ultimately the giving. Heard several forms of giving. It can be money, it can be time, it can be simply listening. So many forms of giving. Mother Teresa expressed it well, though. She said, it's not about how much we do, but about the love we put into the doing. And it's not about how much we give, but about how much love we put into the giving. So really making it a heart practice. And sometimes there is a resistance to the giving. I've felt that, a story I'll share in a moment, can be kind of a sense of oppression, like being taken advantage of. Ajahn Chah said, some people are afraid of generosity. They fear they will be taken advantage of or oppressed. In cultivating our generosity, we are only oppressing our greed and attachment. This allows our true nature to come out and become lighter and freer. I mentioned my partner is an immigrant, and his parents don't speak a word of English, live in Delano, the Central Valley, home of Cesar Chavez. Probably pretty much earned minimum wage their whole lives. But his mother was really moving to me when I learned this. Every day, once a week, one day she cooks a big meal for the homeless. And she has so little, but she gives this offering. And about 25 Mexican immigrants come once a week for a big meal, and she freely offers this meal without expecting anything in return. Probably those most in need, because they're probably, quote, illegal and don't qualify for government support. And I felt that it's pretty yucky, that sense of fear of being taken advantage of. She asked us to help support her by paving a pretty large area for the tables, for the folding tables, and building an arbor for sun protection. And I looked at what the cost was going to be, and at first I thought, this is too much. And when I reflected on it, I felt the yuckiness of that first feeling of too much, and then recognized the purity of her actions and how could I say no? How could we say no to supporting someone who is being so generous and serving those most in need? There's this great story I just read. I don't know who I picked it up from, but this professional golfer, Roberto D'Ascensio, maybe if you remember the name, in the 60s and 70s. And the story is that he won a golf tournament, and he was walking to the parking lot afterwards to his car, and a young woman came up to him and said, told a story about a very sick and possibly dying young son, very young son, and he was so moved that he endorsed the check to her right on the spot and gave her the check. And the next day he was back at the country club celebrating his victory, and some club member said, you know that woman who asked you for help, she's a fraud. And he said, so there is no sick and dying child? And the person said no. And he said, oh, I'm so grateful. I don't know that I could have that feeling. A powerful statement. So one of my teachers, Joseph Goldstein, such a powerful teacher. He's been teaching a 3-month retreat for 40 years. He just finished his last time teaching on the 3-month retreat. So such an enormous contribution to the Dharma. But 4 years ago I heard him speak, and he said he makes it a practice to pay attention to the impulse to give and then to act on the impulse. So whatever the giving might be, paying attention moment to moment and then acting on that impulse. So it's really interesting to see. Sometimes it comes a few minutes late, but sometimes you can go back and correct it. On my retreat, I remember seeing a little candy wrapper. A lot of yogis on retreats bring mini candy bars and then eat their candy bars when they're walking. And I saw this candy bar along the road and a candy bar wrapper. And first I walked by, and I stopped. What happened there, right there? Okay, I saw the candy wrapper. I was a ways away from being back. The thought had arisen, if I pick this up, my hands are going to be dirty. I'm going to have to wash my hands when I get back. And then I saw the ridiculousness of that. And I saw had also been the impulse to pick up the piece of trash, but I'd walked by it. I passed it by. So I walked back, picked it up, felt some level of contentment in the simple act of performing some simple act of generosity. But watching that impulse, and somehow I think there's a regulating mechanism that we end up not giving too much, maybe right up to the edge. I was, some years ago, after my very first Metta retreat, probably 15 years ago, my heart was so open. And I live just a half block from Market Street. So I'm right there in the Castro, and right there by the homeless. And I walked around the corner from my house. It was this time of year, really cold, damp too. And someone on the street who looked homeless without a shirt. And I stopped cold, and I said to him, "You look cold. Here, take my jacket." It was so startling to me because I hadn't had a thought. There was no thought that I could catch that had arisen. There was no thinking about, am I going to offer this jacket to this person or not? In some sense, it felt like the first pure act of generosity of my life because it was so spontaneous. And it was a little bit of an awakening, too, because there was no me in the doing. And I can't take any pride in it because there's no thinking about it. And it probably, with the practice over time, I could see there was probably an impulse there. I didn't catch the impulse. It was the impulse and the action. So the action just happened. But it became a powerful lesson on paying attention to the impulse and acting on the impulse. And seeing how it supports the practice, seeing how it supports the stripping away of the false sense of separate identification, that this me, mine, I that seems so solid is really not so real. I really feel this when I do volunteer work in hospice care. Most of my time as a volunteer in hospice care has been on Sunday mornings for many years. Haven't gotten to attend this group very often over the years. But for many years with Shanti Project and then with Zen Hospice. And the practice is just trusting the heart, sitting, listening, breathing, much like we were doing here in meditation practice. And just trusting the heart. For probably the first year I did that volunteer work, the predominant feeling at the beginning of every shift was I'm not really good enough to do this work. And usually once I got busy, it was gone. But eventually it stripped away. It was nothing missing in the heart, nothing missing in anyone's heart. And we can really trust when we just sit on the ground of awareness, connect to the earth. We can trust the heart. So many times when I'm doing that volunteer work, the words, maybe gratitude for the person's presence, maybe reaching out to touch a hand, just comes from awareness. It doesn't come from a thinking process. You can have such intimate experiences in being with the dying, where all sense of separateness drops away. And connecting to, sometimes with compassion, these beautiful qualities of the heart so much arise right next to each other. The compassion and generosity and kindness and even joy can arise just like that in the presence. Think of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who can really feel compassion hearing someone's story of difficulty, in turn and see a baby and feel the joy. So free that there's no clinging to the pain that was experienced in hearing someone's difficulties and turning to joy. This is a possibility of our practice. I think for all of us, it's a gift we can offer, something we can offer generously to people we love and care about, because we have this practice of present awareness, because of our meditation practice. Sometimes in the midst of the difficulties of loved ones, when we're sitting, hearing, connecting, we can just be present, not need to do anything. Allow space for the people who are there to feel their emotions, to open in some way to awareness itself, even if they're not practitioners. That's what I feel I do most of all as a volunteer, is just to offer presence and allow some space. And we can all do that in our practice. I have a good friend whose sister died recently, and she was back with her other sisters, family members, and her talking about the experience was so clear that her ability to be grounded, connected to the earth, to be aware, was somehow allowing some space, some acceptance, some level of equanimity to arise for her other family members. So I invite you to reflect on that too, that to reflect on the offering of presence to others is an act of generosity. It's something we can all offer as practitioners. So, not expecting anything in return is a real important quality. I'm going to tell a couple stories from my work. I worked at the airport for many years, 35 years, and decided in the last few years, when I really started learning about the importance of generosity and the merit that's established through practicing generosity, when I'd see monks at the airport or nuns, I'd try and offer something. And I know monks and nuns make a pledge of not carrying money. But I think there may be an exception for traveling in the U.S. because they usually have some money. But people in the U.S. don't generally know that monks are not supposed to handle money. But if I'd see a monk going toward a restaurant, I would offer to pay for the meal and try and offer help. So 5 years ago, I saw a monk looking lost, and I just offered help and taking his boarding pass to escort him to the gate where he was going, transferring from a domestic to an international flight. Didn't speak a word of English, and we kind of used a Tibetan English translation app on his iPhone. I guess monks are allowed to carry iPhones. And so we had some communication. We walked almost 3/4 of a mile from Terminal 3 to the international terminal. And really sweet connection being made. And it was interesting that he handed me his boarding pass and he never asked for it back. He just let me hold on to it. And I know my own tendency would be to want to take it back. That this level of trust that was there. He allowed me to buy him a meal. And at the end we hugged each other. It was really sweet. Gave me his card. He turned out to be a Rinpoche, Tibetan Rinpoche, and his card said he headed a college, a monastery, a Tibetan Cultural Center, and a hospital. So he invited me to India to visit and spend time in his monastery. So. But I got attached to that feedback that I received from him. So about 5 months later, I saw another monk at a cash register ready to pay, and I stepped right in and paid. And I thought I'd put a nice hit, nice smile of gratitude. The monk looked away. And I was surprised. And I walked 10 feet, looked back, wasn't looking at me. And I remembered, yes, I'm not expecting anything in return. But still, 50 feet away, I looked at him. Come on, give me something. And it wasn't until I told another friend this, that she told me that's the practice in Asia, that monks and nuns are instructed not to acknowledge an act of generosity. When food is put into their bowl, they don't acknowledge it. And it really actually honors the giver, because it caused me to reflect on that and to see that there was something else, there was some level of greed wanting the hit of a human personal connection. There was some conditionality to the giving. That's another part of the practice, part of the awareness we can bring to our practice. So I wanted to say just a few words about acceptance of generosity. I know for myself, it used to be, I've changed this, but it used to be someone offered to pay a food bill, restaurant meal. I would argue over it. So it's like that's the obligation. But when we accept someone's generosity, we really honor them. So now when someone gives me something, I really make a practice just to express the gratitude and not argue. Maybe I remember the next time that I pick up the tab, that I try and be as generous as they were, but to honor the generosity of others and to express gratitude for it. I was really moved a few years ago, a friend, just getting to know, my partner and I were at their house for dinner, this guy and his partner's house. About 10 or 12 people there, and they were just back from Asia, and Alan had a box of Royce chocolates. Anybody had Royce chocolates from Tokyo? No, I love really good chocolates, but they have to be really good. And these were fantastic chocolates. And so I was raving about these chocolates. And Alan, who I was just getting to know, just spontaneously said, "I've got an extra box, take it home with you." And I thought that was really such a beautiful, kind act of generosity. It was clear there was no thinking going on. He just spontaneously offered that. And it made such a great connection. I wrote him an email of thanks, recognizing kind of the purity and how I was moved by that, and really have become much better friends with him since. So there's something to be said for really honoring the generosity of others. And the Buddha recognized this as the way we establish merit for our practice too. I just want to end by again quoting from the Buddha. Actually I decided to put, my partner and I put this quote into our Christmas cards, or holiday cards we're mailing out, kind of gluing it into the color cards. Generosity brings happiness at every stage of its expression. We experience joy in forming the intention to be generous. We experience joy in the actual act of giving something, and we experience joy in remembering the fact that we have given. I appreciate your attention, and we have time for
yes, we do. We have
comments
about 8 minutes for questions.
Okay. Any reflections from your own practice or life, or any questions? Yes, David?
I was reminded by your beautiful talk about a story I heard about the great Sioux chief Sitting Bull. And when he was first captured by the U.S. Army and imprisoned on a reservation, he got, and before he was later killed by the U.S. Army, another war. Wild Bill Hickox, who was doing his show, which was kind of like the first circus, recruited him, Sitting Bull, from the reservation, to kind of ride around on a horse and be a famous chief. And that show went all over the country and Europe. And every place, the story is every place that Sitting Bull ran across somebody in need, a beggar on the street in Berlin or London, he would give them whatever money he had. And so he came back from every tour broke. And when somebody questioned the wisdom of that, he said, this is the way white people do. Is you see somebody in need, you get them what you have.
Beautiful.
Thank you for your gorgeous talk. I mean, this is sort of the point. But as a young man, I was leaving Manhattan in 1975, and the city was bankrupt, and there was garbage everywhere. And I had just gotten a bunch of money to pay to mail stuff. And on the subway was a woman of such visible wretchedness. She just looked like a pile of a mess. And when I got off the subway, I could feel her behind me coming up the subway. And I just reached my pocket. I didn't know how much was there. And I turned around and said, this is for you. And she said, well, thank you so much. She was fallen gentility. I mean, it was like Scarlett O'Hara. I'll just never forget it. You know, I acted out of her pathos, and she returned this noble-hearted thanks. Just don't get me out of the city. But your comment about that being generous reminds us that we are connected is something I will take with me.
We're so completely interconnected. No separation. Yes.
Yeah, I had sort of the opposite. Somebody was asking for like selling street sheets, and I walked past it and turned around and went back and thought the better of it and bought the street sheet. And he said, "Well, can you make it 20?" And it was like, "You ungrateful!" Is what I thought. And it was like, I just sort of turned and walked away. I acted in my anger and selfishness. And I sort of regret now, like to this day, that I didn't actually offer him. It wouldn't have been a big deal to me. It was just his lack of gratitude. I was robbed of the appreciation. And so, anyways, I've had many opportunities to reflect on that, and given to people quite frequently every time I think about what I was capable of in that moment.
This is our practice when we kind of do the reprogramming of our neurology happens through the clear seeing, kind of seeing these things again and again, and what leads to happiness and what leads in the other direction.
I live at Lake Merritt, and for the last 5 years, the homeless population has grown there. And at first, I was resentful because it's a beautiful neighborhood where I live, but it's become such a problem that it's really pulled compassion out of me. There's an African lady who lives near the Victorian house that still stands at Lake Merritt. Her name is Tu. And I met her a couple of weeks ago. A neighbor downstairs is a caterer, and he just brings all the food after the parties to all the neighbors, and it's always too much. So I had all these sandwiches that I'm a vegetarian, so I don't eat meat normally. And I thought, well, who can I give this to? So I remembered her. So I went over to her, pedaled over, and there she was, and she's got all these grocery bags out there, and her tent, and she tents on the sidewalk, public sidewalk right next to the Victorian. And so I said, would you like this? And she goes, yes, here's $1. And I thought, no, I don't want your $1, I just want you to take this if you want. She goes, well, I have to pay you. And so I just defaulted to taking her $1, and I thanked her very much. So now I have this $1 in my hand. And I was going to San Francisco, which is poorer than Oakland, and I figured someone over here would need the $1. And Street Sheet came up. I was at the hellhole of Powell BART station, and coming back from the exit theater, and there was a man selling Street Sheet. I remember the $2. This was only $1. And he said, would you like a Street Sheet? And I said, no, but I'd like to give you $2. So I gave him $1 and walked on. So a little $1 from $2, you know, but there's a dignity involved, you know. And whenever I go around Lake Merritt now, I try to engage the very frequent homeless residents that are living there now, ask their names, smile, ask them how they are, and if I have something, I give it, you know. But it's my community, and that I have to make it better with compassion, because that is free to give. It's free to offer.
And generosity can build on itself, the way you describe. Beautiful.
So thank you so much, John. This has really been a great talk. I live in Castro, and over the years I've come to know a lot of the people on the street and talk to them and whatnot. And the other day I found myself in Safeway, and I saw one of these guys in this aisle that I needed to go down, but I was in a hurry, and I didn't want to get drawn in, and so I avoided him, got some other stuff, came back, he was gone, got what I needed. And it reminded me that if my generosity is going to be my time and attention, I sort of have to plan ahead, like leave the house a little earlier, where possible, so that I can be generous with my time. Or, if I'm going to be giving money, then when I go to the store, I should pay with a 20 so I get lots of change back. Because you can't, you can't say to somebody, I only have a 20, you have change,
Great ideas, yeah.
So, planning ahead, I think.
Nice reflection.
That impulse, if it's earlier enough, then we can be more generous.
Kind of providing enough space that provides the opening. Great.
John, I really appreciated your comment about impulse, and I will be paying attention to the impulse. Not think, just notice the impulse.
Yeah, notice the impulse and act on it when you can. Yeah. And when I gave that jacket away, it was a jacket 10 years old that I think I paid $30 for. So, would I have given a brand new jacket away? I don't know. I think it probably would have come out as, you look cold, can I run back to my house and get you a jacket? And that's probably the way it would have come out, because I think there's this regulating mechanism of what's reasonable. But most of the time, I don't know. I don't know if I found one time where the impulse was wrong, where I thought, no, this impulse is wrong, I can't do it. I'm really paying attention. When the impulse is there, it is possible to do the doing. And sometimes we find we're capable of much more than we thought we were. And I certainly found that in the hospice care. I kind of found a greater strength and courage and greater trust and just awareness. Greater trust in the beautiful quality of awareness than I thought might be really possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your beautiful moment.
Thank you.
Our host Jerry is going to be going around the bowl. We've just received wonderful instruction about that. He will shake you down. And also this time of year, if you want to write a check to the GBF, you'll get a receipt. Is that not true? We don't do our fundraisers anymore because we exist in a state of amplitude. Thank you all. But if you're moved, that would be lovely. Joe, please give us a
Suggested donations are $10. If you don't have enough, give what you can. If you have a lot, we'll take it. And we have a lot of, we do Larkin Street dinners once a month, which has been going on for
20 years.
20 years.
Wow, beautiful.
And we do a newsletter that goes mostly to prisoners. And then we also take care of our speakers, give them some money. We pay the rent, so that's just an idea what we do. Okay, also I brought refreshments today. There's hot water for tea when you're finished with your cup. You can either leave it in the sink or put it in the dishwasher, depending how generous you want to be today. At 12:30, people go out for lunch. So if you want to meet there, go out for lunch with some people from the Sangha. That's a good idea. We have a sign-up sheet, which is on the credenza. And did I get everything? I think so.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, Dave.
There's an amazing organization in San Francisco called Food Runners. Joe and I are volunteers with it. We pick up food that would otherwise be thrown out. It's left over from companies, restaurants, hotels, markets, all that. And we pick it up and we deliver it to places that give it to people who need it. So in the event that you should have a car and about an hour a week and would be interested in being a volunteer and showing that aspect of your own generosity, you can either go straight online to foodrunners.org and volunteer there, or if you'd like to just talk to me or Joe about what it's like, we could tell you about it.
Yes.
Well, to continue the synchronicity that's going on here, I just wanted to remind people that the Sangha is having a day-long retreat, and it's here, Saturday, March 25th. It's free, and lunch is free, and it's going to be led by Heather Sundberg. She's coming down from Nevada. And it's
Nevada City.
Nevada City, yes. So the theme is community, generosity, and gratitude. And it's an attempt to just bring the Sangha together and reinvigorate it for new ideas for the next year. And I would just put these flyers out there. It's limited to 50, the first 50 who sign up at this point. And my contact information on the website and how to do that is here, and we'll start reminding people again more in February, but just kind of mark the date if nothing else. Okay.
I mentioned we have a day-long LGBT day-long February 4th at Against the Stream.
Great. Did you bring any?
I didn't bring any flyers. They're not ready yet. But,
okay, but we can put it.
Once they're done, we'll get some sent.
Anybody else? Yes.
Just that we are meeting next week. So
we are meeting next week. The refreshments will be festive.
And New Year's Day.
And New Year's Day. Okay? All right, let's get in the circle. Would you touch us with the delegation? Sure.
Offering the merit of our time together to be for the benefit of all beings, for all beings without exception. May our practice, may our presence in the world be for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May it be so.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.